I wanted to start with a little bit of background. I received my meditation instruction in a Zen monastery, and but there's so many different forms of meditation that I wanted to start kind of in a broader field, beginning with the word meditation. It stems from the Latin word momentum, which means to ponder. So I wanted to offer you a little bit to ponder as we enter this. There's some researchers who believe that meditation in some form may likely be as old as humanity itself. Artifacts and records referring to meditation can be found across multiple cultures and all over the globe. The earliest documented images of meditation, people seated in a meditation posture with their eyes half closed, is found on wall art paintings in India dating back to 5,000 years BCE. The oldest texts describing meditation practices can be found in the Hindu Vedas, which date back to 1500 BCE. And before that, stories had already been passed down orally for centuries. Buddhist practices came around the 6th century before Common Era and made their way to China and Japan within 200 years. There's references to meditation in the Old Testament's book of Genesis, where Isaac goes out to a field to contemplate. Eastern Orthodox Christian use of meditation practices are documented in the 10th to 14th centuries, and in Islam, the meditative techniques that became essential elements of Sufism were noted in the 11th and 12th centuries. Jumping up into our era, Vipassana movement began in Burma in the 1950s, around the same time that Maharishi Mahesh Yogi started promoting transcendental meditation here in the US. And another big movement was in the 1970s, where Jon Kabat-Zinn kind of pulled meditation out of a spiritual training context and began developing mindfulness programs in clinical settings. So there's countless forms of meditation, some incorporating movement, visualizations, focus on sounds, and many are seated in stillness. Each has a slightly different purpose, spanning from reaching a state of pure consciousness, transcendence, and liberation from earthly constraints, to tools for spiritual development, and as ways to connect intimately with the divine, and to deepen self-awareness, creating a sense of tranquility, insight, and balance. So what I'd like to offer today is meditation instruction in which we are continuously going to be redirecting our attention to our present moment experience of being. It's very much Zazen form from Zen, but it also uses a lot from what Jon Kabat-Zinn and Vipassana teachers use. So in this practice today, we're going to be exploring this form of interrelated perspectives and looking at body and breath and mind separately and how they all interact with each other. Just wanted to give a moment if there's any quick questions before we actually dive into meditation instruction, but I know that's what you came for, so I don't want to keep you waiting if that's what you're most interested in. But if you do have a question or anything you'd like to say before we jump in, just raise your hand virtually or the real thing. And we'll just take a moment. And I'm going to leave time at the end for some discussion and Q&A then too. Could I just see a show of hands of how many of you who are present today do have some kind of meditation practice or training experience? Okay, so that's Of the people I can see, it's more than half. And I'm not going to make assumptions about the people I'm not seeing. But I'm glad you're here, and hopefully there'll be something new in this, or something you may have heard before, but it'll land a little differently today. So I'm going to begin with the body. And we begin by choosing a position that's going to be wakeful, yet comfortable, upright and dignified and alert, but without strain. So we want to use balance to hold ourselves in place rather than the tension of our muscles. So whether you're sitting in a chair, on a meditation cushion, kneeling on a seiza bench, for all of them, we need to have a firm foundation, so nothing that's overly soft that you can sink into. So if you're in a chair, maybe selecting a kitchen chair or a folding chair rather than a plush, luxurious living room chair. And if you're on the floor, a zafu, a Japanese round cushion, or a gandam, the rectangular Tibetan cushions are great, but a stack of folded clothes works as well as anything else, as opposed to a soft bed pillow. So finding something to sit on, and whether you're in a chair or on one of these cushions, we want to find a way to have our hips elevated higher than our knees, and your pelvis slightly tilted forward. So what this does is we're going to be forward on our sitting bones rather than slouch back on our tailbone. And what happens is if you have your pelvis tilted a little bit, which happens automatically when your hips are higher than your knees, is it allows our spine to express its natural S-curve. It'll lift our ribs away off our lungs so they're not being compressed, and it allows us to breathe more freely. For legs, for those sitting on the floor, there's three main positions. There's Burmese position, where your calves are in front of each other like that in either direction. And there's also half lotus, where one foot would rest on the opposite calf. And then full lotus, where each foot rests on our thigh. Each foot rests on the opposite thigh. If you're sitting in a chair, you want to have your feet flat on the floor in front of you, which for shorter people might mean scooting forwards in the chair and not leaning back. And that'll also help you have that pelvic tilt that allows you to sit a little bit more upright. For shoulders, we want to try scrunching your shoulders up first, and then rather than laying them straight back behind you, which can be a kind of tense position, think of scrunching and then imagine you're pushing your shoulders outward rather than just down. And this is going to open up the whole chest area and again allow more freedom of movement in your breathing, so you are taking in the deepest breaths possible and oxygenating your blood. For our arms, I like to just start by leaving my elbows at my side and just letting my hands drop. And then with elbows at the side, lifting my hands forward and crossing them either in front of my lap with one hand, my dominant hand, resting on my legs, palm up, the other hand resting on top of it, and then thumbs meeting. But a lot of people find it more comfortable to just rest your hands on top of your thighs toward your knees. Not too far forwards where you pull yourself forwards out of your seat, and not too far back where you end up slouching. And the next piece of posture that we look at is our head, and we want to be as tall as we can be sitting down. So Gently tuck your chin in toward your throat, and you'll notice this releases a little bit of pressure on the upper vertebrae and allows the top vertebrae of your spine to be a little taller. If we had our head straight forward or back at all, you're kind of crunching those vertebrae and the nerves connected that move through them. So head just very slightly tucked. Our tongue comes to rest on the upper palate where it meets the top front teeth. And this completes an energetic circuit in the body. And it also helps with saliva, so you don't have to do a lot of swallowing while you're sitting. So it manages the fluid a little bit. Our eyes remain open in this practice, half open, half closed. And it's a little difficult finding a place that's comfortable, but it needs to be relaxed and a very soft gaze. So we're passively able to see what's before us, but we're not looking at it and studying. We're just allowing some information to be there that we don't need to study or engage with. And one way to find a soft, unfocused gaze is to work with your peripheral vision a little. So that thing where you put your thumbs in and move them to the sides to see how far your peripheral vision operates. Try that. And when you get your thumbs far apart and you can just barely make them out with your vision from the sides of your eyes, notice what happens to the vision in front of you. You're still seeing, but you're not really focusing. So we're going to use that soft, unfocused gaze, and depending on your height and if you're in a chair or on a cushion, your gaze will land someplace between 3 and 6 feet in front of you. There's no need to make it difficult. We're not staring, we're not avoiding blinking. Just imagine you are reading a newspaper and are done with the article and you're not reading anymore. Where you can still see, but you're not looking. So it's a passive, gentle experience. So going back to the whole posture, our shoulders are above our hips, our ears are above our shoulders, our eyes are half open with a soft, unfocused gaze. And just take a second and let your body regulate to this position and become familiar with it. And that is to know your place so you're able to find your way back to it. And during a sitting period, if you find that something's beginning to cause some tension or pain, usually if you revisit that pelvic tilt and reshift into the initial position, a lot of times the pain in the rest of people's backs, shoulders, necks, and arms resolves just by resetting that, because you're taking pressure off the nerves in the lower spine. So the next thing that we look at is our breath. And for this practice, we're going to be utilizing what's called diaphragmatic breathing. And this is the breathing that we start out with as infants, and someplace in our first year of life, we shift and start breathing initially into our chest rather than into our belly. So we're going to go back to that early breathing. If any of you have been near babies and watched them breathe, their bellies fill up really big with each breath, and we're going to be doing that. And it might be nice to put one hand on your chest and one on your belly, so you can really feel from the inside and the outside that when you inhale and let your belly fill first in the center of your lungs, and then your upper lungs. And then on the inhale, you're going to empty the upper lungs first, or your chest, and then release air from the central lungs. And then at the very end, releasing the air from your belly. And you might like to pull your navel toward your spine and tighten the abdominal muscles a bit, just to help express the last of the air from your lungs with each breath. And this will allow each breath to be new air and fresh and best oxygenate our blood, which will help our brains and all of our organs function better. And just take a couple of breaths either with your hands there or in your meditation position on your knees or in that mudra on your lap. And just let yourself take a few deeper than usual breaths, kind of exaggerating it just to make it easier to sense the physical sensation from the inside. And for many of us, we've become unaccustomed to this kind of breath. And there might be a little almost panicky moment of, this isn't the right way to breathe, or I forgot how to breathe. And that happens to many people, and it's not likely to be a problem, and our body will catch up with itself. And I don't think anyone's ever suffocated trying this, but there's usually a little strange moment where your breath becomes unfamiliar. So as we breathe, our intention is to place our attention on the breath, each breath, not just the fact that we are indeed breathing, but noticing how each breath is as individual as a snowflake. Each breath is a little different than the one before it and the one after it. And there's something really profound in considering that each time you take a breath, it is the last time you will take that particular breath. It's worth our attention. It's worth arriving for. It's worth attending to. It's worth being awake for. So as we do this, as we begin to connect with our breath and pay attention to the physical sensations of the breath, we notice that the air coming in our nose may be a little cooler. We might feel the sensation of the breath moving down our throat and windpipe, noticing that slightly different rhythm of filling your belly than the center of your lungs, than the top. You may notice your ribs opening to the sides and expanding with your lungs. If you're seated in a chair with a back, you may notice your ribs pushing against the back of the chair with each inhale. There's all of these tiny details that are worth paying attention to. So as we do this, as we bring our intention to the breath and attempt to keep our minds on the physical sensations of each breath, our minds are guaranteed to wander. No matter how long you've been practicing, no matter how great your concentration is. We'll remember something, we'll notice we forgot something, we'll hear a sound that grabs our attention. We'll start wondering if that sound was, the siren was a fire truck or a police car. We'll wonder if we turned off the coffee pot, wonder if somebody needs you in the moment, wondering if you did XYZ and should have known better. And all of this mental activity is completely normal. It's the normal activity of consciousness. Whether we're normally very, very precise and focused, or if we have highly distractible minds, we're all prone to this, and it's okay. This is how human brains work. And as long as we're alive and awake and conscious, our minds are going to generate thoughts. So this meditation practice is not an attempt to eliminate thoughts. It's an attempt to work with our mind in spite of its thoughts. So while in meditation, what we're going to be doing is, if we notice a thought that pulls us away from paying attention to our breath, we're going to gently take the steering wheel and redirect our attention back to that physical sensation of breathing. And we do this without judgment, without criticism, without defensiveness, or making excuses, or creating stories, or rationalizing. We just notice that our attention's drifted elsewhere, and we bring it back to the thoughts and back to the present moment. And the thoughts will take care of themselves. They don't need your attention right now. If it's a very important thought, it will be there for you later on. If it's not that important, it's okay that it just dissolves. So each time we notice that our attention has strayed from our breathing, we just come back to ourselves, back to the moment, and just let the thought go, let the thought be. It'll be fine without our attention, and we don't need to worry about it. It'll always be there for you again if you need it. And you can even just tell the thought, I'll catch up with you later. I'm meditating right now. So for some people, just paying attention to the thoughts or to the breath and releasing the thoughts isn't quite compelling enough. So one technique that's worked with a lot is counting breaths. And I'm going to offer 2 different variations of this that you could try and see if either works for you. And if not, maybe you're just a attention to the breath meditator. So the first technique for counting breaths would be on the inhale. We would silently, to ourselves, count the number 1 for the full extent of the inhale. And then as we're ready to release the breath, we would silently count the number 2 to ourselves for the full extent of the exhale. So it would sound in your own head something like 1, 2, and then we go on to 3 and 4, and continue until you reach 10, which would be 5 breaths really. 5 inhales, 5 exhales, adding up to 10. And let's just try that for a moment. Inhaling with the number 1 in the forefront of your mind. And exhaling with the number 2. And inhaling with number 3. And exhaling number 4. And continuing until you reach 10. And 10 is nothing very special. It's not a mystical, sacred number. It's just a destination point or an arrival point that helps us keep track of our present moment awareness. If we're attempting this practice and we find ourselves at number 15 or 25, we know that we've forgotten to pay close attention to what we were doing. And we just start over again at number 1. And the starting over again isn't punishment in any way. It's really gifting yourself an opportunity to begin afresh. Again, there's no judgment, there's no punishment, there's no rejection of how we're doing. We just notice it and give ourselves the gift of a fresh new start each time we find ourselves distracted So the likelihood is that many people might count to 2 or 3 or 4 and start over again at 1, and count to 2 and start at 1 and count to 4 and start back at 1, and sometimes never reach number 10. And that's great practice. That means you're paying attention, you're staying awake, you're really putting yourself into this. The other counting practice is a little slower and a little less busy. And with this one, we would take our full inhale. And then as we exhale, we would count 1. 1. Quietly to yourself. Inhale again. Count 2 silently for the full extent of the expressing exhale. Count 3 on the next exhale. And continue until you reach 10. And again, you might try over and over again, get distracted each time, go back to number 1 over and over again. You may count to 10 a dozen times in a meditation period. Neither's better or worse. They're just what your practice is that day, and a place to accept this is what it's like right now. And for me, after over 30 years of practice, there's days that are easeful and relaxing and it just works. And there's days that are a struggle and it's difficult. But there's still good meditation periods. It's not necessarily a period that's relaxing makes it a better period. Just sitting down on your seat, taking up this practice, working with your breath is the practice itself. It doesn't have to lead anywhere. You don't have to set a goal for yourself of counting to 10 a certain number of times. You don't need to break records in how long you sit. It's most valuable to try having a sitting period every day rather than a long one once in a while. And there's research that shows even 5 minutes of mindful breathing and attending to your breath each day can shift how our digestive system functions. It can shift our blood pressure. It can shift our tolerance to stressful situations. And it can shift how we relate to each other, how patient we're able to be with ourselves and someone else. So it's worth just trying to work with your mind as it is that day, and accepting that there's days that you're going to be more tense, there's days you're going to be more patient, there's more days you're going to be more or less relaxed, and all of that can be rolled into your meditation practice. So I'd like to suggest that we try sitting together for maybe 15 minutes and try this out, and maybe try the counting inhales and exhales, the counting just the exhales, and trying the just following your breath, just being present and noticing the details of each inhale and exhale. And I'm going to ring a bell to begin. I'm going to ring it 3 times to start our 15 minutes, and I'll ring it twice at the end. And then I would love to hear what this experience was like for you, and if it may be any different or familiar. So let's just spend some time together in stillness and silence, and remembering that the generation of thoughts is the normal functioning of a conscious mind, that we don't need to chase the thoughts away. We accept that they arrive, we don't engage with them, we release them, and then we bring ourselves back to ourselves, bring ourselves home to ourselves and to our practice and to this moment. Thank you for sharing your stillness. So I would love to hear, especially if anyone tried working with just breath, working with the two forms of counting. What were your observations? What was this like? Um, was there anything different in this practice than what you're accustomed to for the people that do meditate? You can just raise your hand. You're welcome to all just unmic and unmute and speak up.
Okay, I'll go. I think I maybe reached 10 about 3 times, and the rest of the time I just got distracted. And I got distracted by thoughts, but they were very inconsequential thoughts. I mean, they were nothing serious. I wasn't ruminating about anything or rehashing what had gone on, in the last day or so, or worried about what was coming. It was just kind of like these random images that would come up, and they were like, "Oh, that's interesting," and it's like, okay, off my count. So. And the other thing I find really, really hard is the instruction to keep to not close your eyes. I find that the hardest part of meditation practice because I keep on my eyes want to keep on blinking. I get distracted by what's in my view, and I find that very, very hard.
That's, I think that's probably the most difficult piece of the instruction for a lot of people. The reasoning behind it is we are more likely to fall asleep or
Yeah,
forget that we're doing something when our eyes are closed. For some people that are very visual thinkers and visually engaged, they almost use the backs of their eyelids as movie screens and project films onto them or stories. So having them partially open makes it a little less likely that you're gonna get caught up in visual thought patterns and sleep. But it also keeps us a little more out of our heads and connected to the environment, so we don't
hmm,
drift off further um, away from our practice and our intention. Sometimes it's easier just to find something really boring to have in front of you,
yeah.
a blank wall or a carpet without a pattern, because those things can get very interesting when you're really digging around for stimulus. Um, the other thing is for some people who wear glasses, it might be a good time to take your glasses off,
Oh,
where you're not going to be able to focus even if you want to. Um, the important thing is just to remember to put them someplace safe so you don't stand up and step on them, because I've seen that happen a lot of times. But the idea of partially open keeps this more in a present moment mode of practice. And when we're not seeing a little bit of where we are, we tend to drift away. And some practices are all about transcending this state of being and going somewhere else. But in zazen and in mindfulness practices, it's all about staying with the here and now, and having our eyes open a little bit at least helps us remember that's where we are or where we're intending to spend our time when we practice. Thank you for sharing that. Does anyone else have a thought
thank
or a
you.
comment or observation?
Yeah, well, for me, I when I meditate, I usually do a loving kindness meditation. So this was very different, just counting the breath. I didn't get to the part where you just focus on your breathing because the time was up and I felt like it had only been 5 minutes. So, um, but it was very different.
There's something funny about our perception of meditation periods and how the same 20-minute or half-hour period can seem like forever some days and can just shoot by like a breath itself on other days.
Mhm. My back was
But
sore
the
from
synthesis,
gardening.
yeah. And sometimes just the leaning back can be, even though it seems like it's a comfortable way to sit, sometimes that can put more strain on our back than an upright kind of balanced position. But you can't do it on all pieces of furniture, and
Mm.
you need to work with where you are and what you have. Thank you for sharing.
I wanted to, I was so, I've realized that I got so focused on just really trying to really breathe deeply, and
Mm-hmm.
that apparently recently I haven't been doing that, because it was challenging, and to, um, so I think I got very focused on the body component of it, um, which was, um, I mean, it was actually, I learned something about that. And, um, and I too had an issue with keeping my eyes open. It was just so easy for me to close them, and especially trying to really breathe deeply. And also I realized that I was used to focusing on my belly for the inhale and the exhale as the starting place. So I was trying to do it like the
And our
instruction,
lungs are
and
really,
it was just interesting.
our lungs are really a huge piece of the inside of our body, and there's a lot of motion there.
Hmm.
I I appreciate what you said, and there's our breath changes, whether it's with age or with illness, or if you've just eaten, it can be really difficult to follow a whole breath. If you're under a lot of stress, our breath tends to stay higher up in our lungs and not get down into our belly. And each time it can be a little different. I mean, besides each breath within a meditation period, the difference of what my breathing feels like when I sit in the morning compared to when I sit in the evening, or if I'm teaching a class in the middle of the day, it's always different. And you can get very caught up in the whys, and that's taking you further away from the actual breath and the actual experience of the breath. So maybe just being able to say, this is what it's like now. And I mentioned earlier when I talked about body, breath, and mind, it occurred to me that I wished I had said body, breath, and heart, mind, because we
Mhm.
would work with emotions the same way we would work with a thought. We notice it, we experience it, we receive it, and then we let it go on its way. And we don't need to chase it. We don't need to try to replicate it or stretch it out. And it's just an experience that comes and goes the same way a thought does, a feeling. I partially almost want to call on somebody, and it would be Robert, just to see which of the three Roberts answer that's on the screen. I don't know if it's the same person or if there's many of you. I saw there were two at one point.
Yeah, there were two. Now there's one, I think.
No, three.
Are there really?
Yeah.
No kidding.
I'll just take it as you really wanted to be here today. And
Yeah, I actually had some trouble with the login, and the first one went dark, so I opened up another one.
Me
I guess it
too.
wasn't all dark for you all. Anyway, I'm here. However many times I'm here. As often happens, maybe it's this time of day. At some point in the maybe toward the end of the instructions, I think I dozed off and was sort of in and out for some period of time, and then came back more fully awake a few minutes before you rang the bell. It was relaxing, but some of that may have been the sleep. I appreciated what your comment, Jeff, at the beginning about coming back to these beginnings many times. It certainly resonates for me. So I'm just glad to be here, and sorry if I confused any of you with my multiple appearances.
Thank you for joining us, all of you. All of you, Robert. Yes, Marianne?
Yeah, Marianne. Do you pause between your in and out breath?
You know, it's a tricky thing. In meditation instruction, when I was being taught how to teach meditation, there was a don't say anything about that. Let them discover that themselves. And I'm not sure why. But for me, I notice in my breath, for one thing, it's both the inhale and exhale slow down quite a bit as I go further into a meditation period. And the breaks between the inhales and exhales also seem to start taking up more space the longer I'm sitting in meditation. But the instructions I gave intentionally did not go near that. But that's something people don't notice until they're really paying attention closely for a while, usually. And there are some meditation practices that have a lot of focus on that, and ones that don't acknowledge it at all. So it depends on the tradition and lineage of the meditation.
I've heard it said that kind of rounding the corner in between inhalation and exhalation, and in between exhalation and inhalation again, that those are the places where it's most easy to lose track of what you're doing, or to kind of spin out, I guess, a little bit. And yeah.
And Robert, I just wanted to touch on one other thing that it just occurred to me that you had mentioned, as that sometimes when we are really paying attention to our body, we hear what it's saying, and sometimes it's I'm tired. And in most situations you can honor that. When I did my training in mindfulness-based stress reduction with John Kabat-Zinn, it was in this big room with like 250 people, and I'm kind of a hyper vigilant person normally, and never fall asleep on a bus or train, and wake up with a start if I do fall asleep, and don't fall asleep very easily. And when we were doing guided meditations and body scans in the middle of this room with 200 people, I fell fast asleep out cold, missed the whole like 40 minutes of guided meditation, and when I woke up, really couldn't believe I just fell asleep in the middle of the sound and these strangers. And when your body needs it, it needs it.
I have another question too. I've heard contradictory instructions on whether to breathe normally and not kind of pay attention to how deep you go, or to breathe deeply.
I did suggest deep breathing deeply at the very beginning, when we were just kind of finding where our breath was in the body. And I'm not sure, but I hope I mentioned breathing naturally at your natural depth and not forcing it afterwards. But I may have neglected that, and I apologize if I did. But however your breathing is, it's it's just about noticing it and staying
Mm.
present with it.
Mm.
And and this, breath is, it's just a body function. We do it unconsciously pretty well when we're not trying to pay attention to it. But there's something really useful about it as an object to place our attention on, in that it's always with us and you can't forget it somewhere. And it happens in the present moment. And you can't breathe tomorrow afternoon's breath. You can't rebreathe this morning's breath. And in a practice that is about bringing your attention to your body and your breath and your mind in this moment, that's when the breath is occurring. So it's landing you in the now. However it is, whether it's deep or shallow or faster than usual or difficult and strained. It's what it is for you today at this hour of the day, and might look different when you try it again at another time tomorrow.
I know we're about a minute over, so I hesitate to do this, but I just wanted to share one thing really quickly. But we do want to be mindful, so to speak, of the clock too. But one of the things I'm always reminded of, I think in the West maybe primarily, we use this term "our mind," and it's kind of a big catch-all, and it includes awareness, consciousness, and our brain, kind of in the popular lexicon. It really includes all that stuff. But doing this practice, just speaking for myself, it really just reminds me that there's really a couple of things there that are that are related. They're all they're all part of me, but they are separate functionings. My brain is a muscle that and its job is to think stuff. It's just a CPU, and it just does that, and it does it on its own agenda, and it does it like a petulant 4-year-old child. My consciousness or my awareness is a different thing, and I think, at least for me, what this practice does is helps me identify the latter and move into it, and kind of just, I'm not trying to turn off my brain, because that would be dead. I would die if I did that. But just as Gakyo said earlier, just you know, tell it, go take a nap or go play with your toys or something, because I'm busy. I'll see you later. and my brain doesn't like that very much, and it'll put up a mighty fuss. And I think we all experience that. So I just wanted to share that. I hope that helps, Gakyo.
Yeah. Now, when I started practicing and working with counting inhales and exhales, I think it was months before I got up to number six. It's Our minds can be really busy, and we don't even notice that they are until we're intentionally putting our attention somewhere else. And when I was teaching meditation at Naropa University, the college students would be like, "Holy crap, I had no idea that my mind was this busy," until they kind of started watching it, and it's amazing. It can really be amazing. And it's us. It's who we are and how we are all the time.